Does evolutionary theory contradict the notion of God's creation? I do not believe in an unabridged version of evolution. It doesn't seem compatible with the biblical view of creation we talked about in our first lesson from the Nicene Creed. Remember, the Bible asserts that the act of creation suggests God's control over all things. It also suggests that he is still active in creating, in making of the universe his purposes. He's actively involved. So let me explain. I believe, first of all truth is God's truth. Sometimes Christians get nervous about this, but as Christians, we are not only not afraid of scientific discovery, we welcome it. All truth is God's truth. Theologians call this general revelation. So specific revelation would be the revelation or the knowledge that we get from the Bible about connecting to God, and specifically through the life of Jesus. General revelation is the revelation that God gives us in the universe, God gives us in our hearts as humankind. Ecclesiastes said that he put heaven in each of our hearts. So this general revelation, this principle that God has written himself into the universe, his character, his nature, this means that we can have confidence in science. Scientists are not going to one day discover something that makes us all go, oh, there can be no God. You know, scientists have flirted with that notion for the past 200 years and it just hasn't happened. A few years ago, I read a book by Dr. Francis Collins. He's the director of the National Institute of Health in Maryland. He was also the head of the Human Genome Project, which was the first project to map the entire human genome. He wrote a book called The Language of God. It's well worth reading. The book is really two parts, so I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. The first part he wrote to address scientists, to essentially say, hey, it's legitimate to believe in God. He wrote the second part, by the way, to address Christians like me. And basically, he was making the argument, hey, get used to it. Evolution is true. The whole Monty, this is how God created the world and is creating the world. Evolution, in this case, meaning the natural selection of random events, accidental events through natural selection. We evolve and change. One species turns into another eventually over the course of millions of years through these random acts and natural selection. So I don't think, Dr. Collins is a Christian, and I don't think you're a weak Christian if you believe this. But for me, even though I have high confidence in science as a discipline, I have an even higher confidence in the Bible. I literally do. And I believe the full-blown, unabridged version of evolution, as I said, is inconsistent with the biblical view of creation. So a little more. Here's what I actually think. Of course, there is truth in some of the principles of evolution. Without getting into detail, because I'm not smart enough, I'm not a biologist, but we can see evolution at a micro level, small levels. But at a macro level, moving from species to species, for instance, there's no actual evidence. And I honestly believe that one day some biologist will do to evolution what Einstein did to Newtonian physics. I know a little bit more about this area, and you know, Einstein adjusted Newton and he amplified him, and in some ways he kind of overturned Newton. So literally, I believe that one day some biologist will come along and do that to Darwin in a way that, and Darwin's theory of evolution in a way that Christians will be able to say, oh yeah, well, that's completely consistent with Scripture. Yeah, I can see it that way. So there are certainly some truths to evolution in a micro sense, but the unabridged version of evolution, I think, is inconsistent with the Scripture. I'll add one more thing. After service on Sunday, one of our elders, a man named Jabin Bell, came up to me and made an interesting point. I talked on Sunday about order and design as a suggestion that there is a God. How could this happen randomly? And Jabin made the point that this is also for him an argument against evolution. You know, we know things in our universe, if left to their own design, move toward entropy. They move toward increasing disorder. They don't move toward higher and higher order and higher levels of complication and intricacy. So I don't think you're a lesser Christian if you believe in the theory of evolution. It is inconsistent with the unabridged version of evolution is inconsistent with the biblical view of God's creation of the universe to me.